You know those stories you read online? The ones about in-laws who are a little too involved, a little too pushy, maybe a little bit toxic. Yeah, well, I used to read those and think, thank God my mother-in-law, Barbara, isn't that bad. I was wrong. She wasn't that bad. She was worse. My life before the ticket was normal, mundane. I worked as a paralegal for a mid-sized firm. Long hours, decent pay, but the kind of job that didn't exactly set my soul on fire. I was married to Mark. A good man, sometimes a bit of a mama's boy, but we were happy. We had a cozy little apartment, 2 rescue cats, and a 5-year plan that involved saving up for a tiny house outside the city. Then came the Friday that changed everything. It was raining. A miserable, gray, end-of-the-week kind of rain. I was stopping at the corner store to grab a bottle of cheap wine and some microwave popcorn. As I stood in line, I saw the jackpot sign flashing. $327 million. It was the highest it had been all year. On a whim, and I mean a total whim because I never played, I grabbed a quick pick ticket for $5. It was just a silly impulse, a what-if moment to distract me from the rain. I got home, microwaved the popcorn, poured the wine, and almost forgot the ticket entirely. Mark was already asleep on the couch, exhausted from his double shift. I sat on the kitchen counter, lazily checking the numbers on my phone against the cheap piece of paper I'd tucked into my jeans pocket. The first number matched. Okay, $5 back. The second number matched. The third. The fourth. My heart started doing this frantic hummingbird flutter against my ribs. I had to squint at the tiny numbers on the screen, convinced I was reading them wrong. The 5th number matched, and then the Powerball. It was like a quiet internal explosion. Not a scream, not a jump, just pure, blinding shock. I had matched all 6 numbers. I had won $327 million. I stared at the ticket, then at Mark sleeping peacefully on the sofa, then back at the ticket, $327 million. My first instinct wasn't to scream and wake him up. It was a cold, terrifying thought. If I tell him, I have to tell his mother. And that's where the trouble really began. See, Barbara was the kind of woman who saw her son's money as her money, his success as her success, and apparently my sudden fortune as a joint family fund with her name stamped right at the top. She had a way of suggesting things that always ended up draining our savings. Oh, Mark, darling, my little convertible is getting old and my back really needs a new SUV with lumbar support. You and Amy could cover the down payment, couldn't you? This wasn't a down payment. This was generational wealth. I knew with absolute certainty that if I told Mark immediately, he would tell Barbara within the hour, probably before the sun rose. And she would descend upon us like a financial vulture, claiming that she had manifested this for us and that we needed to invest wisely in the form of her new beachfront condo. I took a deep breath, tucked the ticket into a Ziploc bag, and then sealed that bag inside a nondescript shoebox on the highest shelf of my closet, the one Mark never touched because he claimed it was too dusty. For 3 days, I lived with the secret. 3 days of walking around like a ghost, a multi-millionaire in cheap jeans, smiling nervously and ordering the same sad takeout I called in sick to work. I had to figure out how to handle the win, how to handle the public attention, and most importantly, how to handle Barbara. I finally told Mark on Tuesday after I had already contacted a lottery attorney and a financial advisor. I didn't tell him the exact amount. I shaved off $100 million just in case, But I told him we had won big, Mark, I said, my voice shaking despite my rehearsals. We won the lottery. It's a lot. Enough that you never have to work another day in your life. He just stared at me, his eyes wide and slowly filling with tears. He hugged me, spun me around, and we laughed and cried. It was the most beautiful, genuine moment we'd had in years. Then, just as the relief was washing over me, he pulled back, wiped his eyes, and said, "Mom is going to lose her mind. We have to tell Mom." There it was, the inevitable. "Mark, wait," I pleaded, grabbing his hand. "We need to talk to the lawyers first. We need a strategy. We can't tell anyone until we cash the ticket. This is massive." He tried to argue, but the lawyer's instructions, absolute silence until you have a plan, were ringing in my ears. I knew I couldn't stop him from telling her forever, but I bought myself a few precious days. But days with Barbara were always too long. The very next morning, my phone was ringing off the hook. It wasn't Mark. He was already at his job trying to be normal. It was Barbara. She never called me directly. She always called Mark. This was new. This was bad. "Amy, darling, is it true? Mark said you had a small win? Like how small? Is it enough for that new car I wanted? Because I saw a lovely Porsche SUV that would look perfect in my driveway." I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach, Mark had told her. And worse, he had downplayed it, calling it a small win, which in Barbara's mind only meant a small fraction for her. "Hello, Barbara," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Mark exaggerated. It's a very modest amount, and we're dealing with the paperwork now." I used vague, boring, bureaucratic language, hoping to bore her into submission. Nonsense, I saw the smile on Mark's face. He never smiles like that unless it's big, Amy. "Now listen to your old mother-in-law," she cooed, the sweetness in her voice thicker than cheap syrup. "The smart thing to do is to sign it over to an established family trust. My cousin Arthur is an excellent estate attorney, and of course a portion of that money should go towards me, your spiritual guide, for all the good karma I sent your way." I almost dropped the phone. The sheer audacity. "Barbara, we already have a lawyer, and the money is going into a trust for Mark and me." I corrected her, making the delineation crystal clear. The sweetness instantly evaporated. "You selfish girl. You think you can keep Mark's fortune all to yourself. I am his mother. I raised him. That money is mine as much as it is his. You just happened to buy the ticket." She hung up on me. My hands were shaking, and I realized I had not only been right to worry, but I had severely underestimated the level of her greed. This was no longer just about a small donation or a new car. This was a direct declaration of war over my winnings. I looked at the clock. It was time to go see the lawyer. I knew, standing there in my quiet apartment with the faint smell of Mark's leftover coffee, that I had to move fast and be utterly ruthless. Barbara was going to try to take everything, and I was going to make sure she lost it all. The lawyer's office was all leather and glass, the kind of place that smelled expensive and slightly intimidating. His name was Mr. Harrison, a sharp older man with a reputation for handling high-profile, messy situations, exactly what I needed. I leaned across the polished mahogany table, gripping my hands together. "Mr. Harrison, my mother-in-law, Barbara, is aggressive. She believes she's entitled to my lottery winnings. She's already called me, demanding I transfer a portion into a trust managed by her cousin." Mr. Harrison didn't even blink. He simply steepled his fingers. "Ah, the classic in-law entitlement scenario. It's sadly common, Amy. The moment wealth enters the picture, family dynamics often devolve into a feeding frenzy. Now, let's go over what we've done. We've secured the ticket in a bank vault. We've established the blind trust. You chose the lump sum payout, correct? Yes, I want this done, settled, and secured as quickly as legally possible. Excellent. The money is legally yours, and since you bought the ticket, it is legally non-marital property in the eyes of the initial win. However, because you are married to Mark, it immediately becomes tricky. Anything used during the marriage is considered shared. And more importantly, Mark's relationship with his mother is the actual ticking time bomb here. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. He loves her, but he's also terrified of her. She uses guilt like a weapon. Every time she needs money, it's always, "Remember that expensive summer camp I sent you to?" Or, "I didn't buy a new coat for 3 winters so you could have a bike." Mr. Harrison nodded empathetically. Mark is the weak link, Amy. If she convinces him to borrow or invest just a few million, that money is gone. We need to legally protect your assets from Barbara, and sadly that means legally protecting them from Mark, at least initially, until we have an agreement. He slid a document across the desk. It was a lengthy, complex post-nuptial agreement. This document states that your lottery winnings and any assets purchased with them remain your separate property, even during the marriage. It's an insurance policy. If Mark is going to give money to his mother, and believe me, he will feel compelled to, it has to be his money, not yours. The pen felt heavy in my hand. Signing a post-nup felt like admitting my marriage was failing before the ink on my lottery check had even dried. But looking at the document, I wasn't protecting myself from Mark. I was protecting us both from Barbara. Mark would never forgive himself if he bankrupted us to appease his mother. "Does he have to sign this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Yes, and he must have his own independent legal counsel review it. No pressure, no coercion. It needs to be clean. This is the ultimate test, Amy. He has to choose the security of our future or the immediate toxic demands of his mother." I left the office with the agreement feeling like I was carrying a grenade. That evening, I laid it all out for Mark. I explained the tax implications, the legal necessity of the trust, and then the elephant in the room, the post-nuptial. I watched his face go from thrilled excitement to crushed disappointment, and finally to bewildered confusion. "A post-nup? Amy, why? Are you saying you don't trust me?" he stammered, his eyes hurt. "Mark, I trust you," I insisted, taking his hands. "I don't trust Barbara. She's already called me, demanding that I hand over the money to her cousin. If you sign this, that money, our future, is untouchable by her. If she asks you for $5 million for a startup investment, you can honestly say, 'Mom, I can't touch that money. It's Amy's legally protected asset.' But she's gonna flip out. She's gonna say, 'I'm choosing you over my own mother,'" he pleaded, looking genuinely panicked. "You are choosing us, Mark. You're choosing our life, our freedom, and our retirement over her financial control. If we don't sign this, we could lose it all trying to satisfy her." The next few days were agonizing. Mark went to a lawyer, a man who, thankfully, emphasized the legal necessity of protecting such a massive sum from external pressures. Mark wrestled with his guilt, his loyalty, and his sheer relief that he was suddenly rich. Finally, he came home, tired but resolved. "I signed it," he said simply, dropping the documents on the table. My lawyer said it's the only way to keep the peace. Ironically, Mom can scream all she wants, but she can't touch it. I felt a surge of triumph, quickly replaced by dread. The legal battle was won, but the family war had just begun. Barbara now knew two things. First, we were rich. Second, I was the gatekeeper, and the gate was locked. She went ballistic. Her initial strategy was a combination of emotional blackmail and passive-aggressive warfare. First, the texts. I guess some people forget who cooked all those holiday dinners for them. Karma is a cruel mistress, Amy. Enjoy your lonely money. Then, the public shaming. She started showing up at Mark's workplace during his lunch breaks, loud crying about how her evil, selfish daughter-in-law had stolen her son's happiness and cut her out of the family. Mark was mortified, nearly getting written up. But her main focus was our apartment. We lived in a complex where everyone knew everyone, and Barbara was a regular fixture, bringing homemade cookies that were actually just scouting missions. One Saturday morning, she showed up unannounced, clutching a tattered old photo album. "Mark, darling, look at this," she said, her voice dripping with fake sorrow as I watched from the kitchen. "This is a photo of our beautiful home, the one I sacrificed everything for, the house I raised you in." She was referring to the large 4-bedroom colonial house where she and Mark's late father had lived for 30 years. It was her pride and joy, a testament to her success and her current financial anchor. "Mom, what are you doing?" Mark asked, looking confused. "I'm just reminding myself, darling, now that Amy is forcing you to live in this box," she said, looking around our perfectly nice 900-square-foot apartment with disdain. "I have to remember what a real home feels like." Then she dropped the bomb, her eyes fixed on me in the kitchen. "I'm retiring soon, you know, on a fixed income. That old house is a burden now. Too many stairs for my knees. I think I'll have to sell it. It'll break my heart. But what else can a struggling, retired mother do?" It was a blatant hint. She was basically saying, "Buy my house for an inflated price, or I'll sell the family legacy to strangers, and it will be all your fault." Mark's face was pale. "Mom, don't talk like that. We can help. We can give you money to fix the knees, whatever you need." Barbara cut him off with a dramatic wave of her hand. "Oh, I don't need handouts, Mark. I need respect. And I need a small, luxurious condo in Florida, which this house will pay for if I sell it fast." I watched her, a slow, cold realization forming in my mind. She was using the house, the single most emotional asset she owned, as her final weapon. She thought she was maneuvering me into paying her off to save Mark's sentimental attachment to his childhood home. But Barbara had made a mistake, a massive one. She had just told the multi-millionaire paralegal, the woman who had been trained to search for property liens and title defects, that her house was a burden. I walked out of the kitchen, a polite, almost sickly sweet smile plastered on my face. "Barbara, you know what? That's terrible. You shouldn't have to worry about selling that beautiful house, especially with your bad knees," I said, walking right past Mark, never taking my eyes off hers. Her eyes gleamed. She thought she had won. "Oh, Amy, you are finally seeing the light. It's such a stressful process." I leaned in, my voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial whisper. "Don't worry about a thing, Barbara, because I'll handle the entire process for you." I paused for maximum effect, watching the smug look on her face turn into one of nervous confusion. "I'm gonna buy your house." The look on Barbara's face was priceless. It was a rapid shift from smug satisfaction to pure, calculating greed. She hadn't expected the offer, but the sound of "buy your house" immediately translated to "cash cow" in her brain. Mark, standing behind her, looked utterly confused, as if he couldn't decide if I was being incredibly generous or incredibly insane. "You'd buy the house, Amy?" she asked, trying to sound gracious but failing spectacularly. Her eyes were already scanning the room, likely calculating how much she could hike the price up now that she had a captive buyer, her own son's lottery-rich wife. "Of course, Barbara," I replied, keeping my smile fixed. "It's a beautiful house and Mark has so many great memories there. We need a bigger place now anyway. It just makes sense. You get your money quickly, no realtor fees, and no stressful open houses. It's a win-win." "Well, yes, that is very kind of you, Amy. Very family-oriented," she purred, pulling the photo album closer to her chest like a protective shield. "It's worth quite a bit, of course, all those years of meticulous upkeep. Plus, the sentimental value alone adds a premium." This was the opening I needed. I knew her game. She was going to try and corner me into paying millions over market value just to keep the family legacy in our hands. "Sentiment is valuable, Barbara, but unfortunately, lenders don't accept it as collateral," I said smoothly. "But don't worry, I'm being advised by the best my lawyer is already arranging for an independent, certified appraisal. It's the fairest way to handle it, professional, unbiased, and quick. Once the appraisal comes back, we'll make a formal offer based on the current market value." The smile on her face stiffened. An independent appraisal was the last thing she wanted. She wanted me to pay whatever inflated number she plucked out of thin air. "An appraisal? Oh, that seems unnecessary," she stammered. "It takes so long, and appraisers often miss the true value of a home like ours. You know, the custom finishes, the imported Italian tile." I knew the tile. It was hideous beige ceramic from a local big box store. "It's standard procedure, Barbara. To protect both of us," I insisted, completely unfazed. "We'll send the appraiser over next Tuesday. You'll be home, won't you?" She knew she couldn't refuse. If she did, she'd look unreasonable and block the sale, thereby confirming to Mark that she was being purely motivated by greed. She reluctantly agreed, but the look in her eyes promised that this wasn't over. After she left, Mark was full of nervous energy. "Amy, why did you do that? You're buying her house. She'll expect us to let her stay there or pay for her Florida place. We could have just given her a gift of a few thousand." "Mark, if we gave her a gift, she'd spend it on a new handbag and then be back next month asking for more," I explained, pulling him to the couch. "She's not asking for help. She's demanding control. I'm not buying the house for her, I'm buying it for us. Think of it. A massive home, fully paid for, a clean slate. And as for her expectations, well, let's see what the contract says when we get to that point." The next few days were quiet, too quiet. Barbara was clearly plotting. She didn't call. She didn't text. My lawyer, Mr. Harrison, on the other hand, was busy. He handled the appraisal, and when the number came back, I wasn't surprised. The house was structurally sound, but Barbara's meticulous upkeep had mostly consisted of dated paint colors and minor cosmetic repairs. The market value was lower than Barbara's inflated expectations, but still a substantial 7 figures. A few days later, Mark and I were having dinner when the doorbell rang. It was a courier service. The woman handed me a thick, official-looking envelope. "What's this?" Mark asked, frowning. I opened it. It was a formal legal notice from Barbara's cousin, Arthur, the excellent estate attorney she'd mentioned. It wasn't an official contract, but a scathing, passive-aggressive letter informing me that based on sentimental family equity and Mark's birthright, the minimum acceptable price for the house was 1.5 times the appraised market value. They also included a handwritten addendum from Barbara herself, demanding that the sale contract include a clause granting her lifelong unrestricted visitation rights to the property, essentially allowing her to come and go as she pleased. I laughed, a sharp, mirthless laugh that startled Mark. She thinks this is a negotiation. She thinks she can bully me with birthright and visitation rights into paying millions extra, I said, slamming the paper onto the table. Mark, this is no longer about a house. This is a power struggle. And I am tired of being the submissive daughter-in-law. Amy, just pay her the extra money. It's nothing to us now. Just make her stop, Mark pleaded, rubbing his temples. He hated confrontation. No, Mark. She sees weakness and exploits it. If I give her $1 extra out of fear, she will never, ever stop. She has to learn that I am not a bottomless piggy bank and that I can be more ruthless than she is. I called Mr. Harrison immediately. I told him to draft the contract. Draft it based exactly on the appraised value, not a cent more. Include all standard purchase clauses, including immediate vacancy upon closing. And Mr. Harrison, I want you to find every single loophole, every piece of financial leverage you can use against her. I want this contract to be ironclad, legally perfect, and entirely non-negotiable. You're going for the kill, Amy, Mr. Harrison said, his voice carrying a note of admiration. She tried to steal $327 million from me, Mr. Harrison. I'm just taking back what she tried to use as collateral. The contract was delivered to Barbara's attorney the next day. It was a masterpiece of legal precision. The exact appraised value, a quick closing date, and zero mention of visitation rights. It was a take-it-or-leave-it offer. We didn't hear from Barbara for a full 48 hours. I knew she was agonizing. She wanted the money, but she hated that the amount wasn't her ridiculous demand, and she hated the thought of losing control over the house and me. On the third day, my phone rang. It was Barbara. She was trying to sound controlled, but her voice was tight with suppressed fury. Amy, you know you are being completely unreasonable. The furniture alone is worth more than that appraisal. The furniture is not included in the contract, Barbara. You'll need to remove it before closing, I replied calmly. Silence, then a hiss. Fine, I accept the offer, but you listen to me, girl. You think you've won. You think buying this house makes you the boss? This is still my son's childhood home. I will be back. I will be there for holidays. I will be there for Mark's birthday. You can't stop me from seeing my own son. I let her ramble, her anger bubbling just beneath the surface. When she finally paused, catching her breath, I delivered the next piece of the plan, the part Mr. Harrison had called brilliant leverage. Actually, Barbara, there's one more small, necessary detail I need you to understand, that while I'm buying the house, I'm not exactly taking possession right away. Mark and I have decided to stay in our apartment for a few months to oversee some extensive renovations before we move in. Renovations? What kind of renovations? She demanded suspiciously. I smiled, a genuine chilling smile this time. We're tearing down the house and building a brand new custom home. The sudden stunned silence on the other end of the line was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. It was better than the sound of the winning lottery numbers being read out. "You're tearing it down," Barbara finally sputtered, the words thick with disbelief and rising panic. "Amy, you can't. That's Mark's childhood home, the memories, the garden where he took his first steps. You wouldn't dare." "I dare, Barbara. We're hiring an architect next week," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "Mark and I decided that if we're going to use this incredible opportunity, we might as well build our dream house from the ground up, something modern, eco-friendly. The current structure just doesn't meet our needs." I didn't actually hate the house, but I knew that this threat was the only thing that could truly sever her attachment and her sense of ownership. She had used that house as emotional leverage for decades. Now, I was turning the land itself into a clean new battlefield. "Mark, is this true?" she shrieked, clearly yelling for her son. I heard Mark's muffled, nervous voice in the background, likely saying something vague and non-committal like, "Mom, we'll talk about it later," or "It's just an idea right now." Barbara returned to the phone, her voice now a frantic, high-pitched whine. "Amy, listen to me. That house is structurally perfect. It was built in the 50s with real wood. It's solid. If you want a clean slate, just renovate the kitchen. It needs a modern stove, honestly. You don't have to ruin everything." "We've already consulted with a demolition company, Barbara. The contract has been signed," I lied easily. I hadn't signed anything, but the threat was very real. "We're aiming for a groundbreaking ceremony by the end of next month. You'll need to be completely moved out and the house emptied before the closing date. We can't have your furniture or your memories getting in the way of the excavators." I hung up. I didn't give her a chance to argue, plead, or use guilt. Mark immediately looked at me with wide, betrayed eyes. "Amy, we are not tearing down my childhood home, are we? You just said that to make her mad, right? That place is beautiful." He was genuinely upset, and I felt a pang of guilt, but I also saw the sheer terror in his eyes at the thought of facing his mother's wrath if he confirmed the demolition. "Mark, look at me," I said, taking his face in my hands. "We are not tearing it down, but she doesn't need to know that. That house is the last piece of leverage she has over us. She wants the visitation rights. She wants the emotional control. By threatening to level the house, I am destroying her weapon. The moment the sale is finalized and she gets her money, we can change our minds about the new build. But until that contract is signed and the money is in her account, she has to believe we will turn that lot into a giant sandbox." Mark looked relieved, but also impressed, a rare expression when dealing with his mother. "So you're playing a long con?" "I'm playing for peace, Mark, and the only way to get peace from Barbara is to show her I am the greater threat." The next week was chaos. Barbara was in a frenzy. She didn't just call, she showed up at our apartment 3 times, once carrying a plaster cast of Mark's baby hand, crying about how the memories would be buried forever. She called her cousin Arthur, who sent us a series of increasingly desperate letters, attempting to invalidate the contract on the grounds of emotional duress. Mr. Harrison crushed every single one of them. Then came the closing date. It was scheduled for a Tuesday afternoon at Mr. Harrison's office. Barbara, dressed in an expensive black suit, arrived with Arthur, who looked distinctly uncomfortable. Mark and I were already there, seated across the table. Barbara shot me a look of pure hatred. She clearly hadn't slept. She was clinging to Arthur's arm, whispering about the injustice of losing her son's sanctuary. The process was mercifully quick. Mr. Harrison presented the documents. Barbara, through gritted teeth, signed the deed transferring the house title to me. Arthur grumbled about predatory contracts. Then the wire transfer confirmation landed on the table. The full, correct, appraised amount, exactly as promised. Barbara stared at the wire confirmation. All the frantic energy suddenly drained out of her. She was rich, financially free. Her hand trembled slightly as she picked up her copy. For a moment, I thought she might actually feel relief. Maybe, just maybe, she would thank us, take her money, and disappear to Florida. I was wrong again. She took a deep breath, puffed out her chest, and fixed me with her most condescending glare. Well, Amy, now that the money is secure and I have successfully provided Mark with the capital to begin his new life, a capital I hope he handles better than you have, I suppose the next step is the move. I want to be very clear. I am taking the chandelier from the dining room. I am taking the built-in bookshelf from the study. And Mark and I will arrange the schedule for me to retrieve the rest of my belongings over the next month. I assume you don't plan on being a tyrant, now that you've gotten your way. This was it. The final stand. She thought that because the money had transferred, she still had control over the process, over the timeline, and over the objects in the house. I looked at her, then at Mr. Harrison, who gave me a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. Mark was pale, looking from his mother to me, bracing himself for the explosion. I leaned forward, placing my hands flat on the table. Barbara, I need you to listen to me very carefully. My voice was low, clear, and utterly devoid of emotion. The house closed 10 minutes ago. The title is officially and legally in my name. The money is in your account. You are no longer the owner. She glared at me. And your point is, girl? My point is this, I said, taking a breath and delivering the line I had rehearsed in my head for weeks. The closing date was the absolute deadline for vacating the property. It was written in the contract you just signed. You were supposed to have all your belongings out by 10 a.m. this morning. Her face went slack with shock. What? No, that's absurd. The contract said I had until the end of the day. The contract stated immediate possession upon closing, Barbara. Mr. Harrison interjected smoothly, pointing to a highlighted section. And as a professional courtesy, the movers we hired to remove the previous owner's remaining belongings were scheduled for 1 p.m. today. Barbara's eyes grew wide. Movers? Amy, you didn't hire movers. You wouldn't. My antiques are still there. My Persian rugs. They're not your antiques or your rugs anymore, Barbara. They're technically in a house I own. I corrected her, not letting her gasp for air. But don't worry, they aren't going to the landfill. I paused, letting the fear build in her eyes. They're already gone. Barbara completely lost it. The controlled fury she'd maintained for months snapped like a brittle twig. She shot out of her chair, knocking it over with a loud crash. Arthur, her lawyer cousin, grabbed her arm, trying to maintain some semblance of decorum, but she was beyond reasoning. Gone? What do you mean, gone? You broke into my house? You stole my property, she screeched, pointing an accusing finger at me. Her face was bright red, mottled with rage and disbelief. No, Barbara, I didn't break in. I walked into a house I legally owned. I corrected her calmly, leaning back in my chair. As Mr. Harrison pointed out, the contract mandated immediate vacancy and possession upon closing. When the house was still full of your personal property this morning, I had a fiduciary duty to secure the premises and prepare the property for its new owners. Mr. Harrison smoothly handed her a simple receipt on a padded letterhead. Mrs. Barnes, your remaining personal effects were carefully cataloged, packed by a professional moving company, and placed into a secure, climate-controlled storage unit. The unit is in your name, fully paid for 3 months, and here is the key and the access code. Barbara snatched the paper, tearing her eyes away from me long enough to look at the address. It was miles away, in an industrial park on the other side of town. The ultimate inconvenience. You had no right. My mother's vase, my photo albums, my designer clothes. They're probably all crushed. You did this to humiliate me, she wailed, tears finally streaming down her face. But they weren't tears of sorrow. They were tears of thwarted control. I did this to take possession of a multi-million-dollar asset without delay, Barbara. You had 3 weeks between the signing of the initial agreement and today's closing to move your items. You chose to use that time to send us harassing legal letters and attempt to renegotiate the terms, I stated, my voice a flat monotone. I simply enforced the contract you signed. Mark, who'd been sitting frozen, finally leaned into the table. Mom, please. Amy had the movers pack it carefully. It's just a move, so you have the money now. You can buy all new things for your Florida condo. But to Barbara, the loss of those things wasn't a financial problem. It was a profound loss of power. The contents of that house were her physical extensions, the things that tied her to her past and her control over Mark. Now they were boxed up, locked away, and under my control until she drove out to retrieve them. She looked at Mark, and her anger focused entirely on him. And you let her do this? You let your wife bully your mother and remove your childhood memories? You've traded your own mother for that woman's disgusting lottery money. I should have known you were weak. The insult hit Mark hard. He finally snapped, standing up, his face tight. Stop it, Mom. I signed a contract. You signed a contract. Amy is right. You had weeks. All you did was try to steal more money and make my life miserable. You got the full asking price, the appraised price. Take the money, be happy, and stop trying to control every single thing I do. It was a moment of true, glorious rebellion from Mark. It shocked Barbara into momentary silence, but it wasn't the final blow. I had saved the best for last. Barbara was gathering her purse and keys, her voice now dangerously soft, dripping with venom. Fine. You want to play the legal game, Amy? Fine. I will move out immediately. But you know what? Since you are so keen on moving quickly, I want you and Mark to meet me at the house tonight. I want to say goodbye to my property, and I want to see this monstrosity of a demolition permit you claim to have. Mark and I exchanged a quick look. I knew I had to maintain the bluff. We can meet you there at 7 p.m., I agreed, and you can see the initial plans for the new property. We arrived at the house precisely at 7 p.m. It was getting dark, and the large, familiar colonial house looked eerie, bathed in the orange glow of the streetlights. Barbara was already there, leaning against her car, her arms crossed, looking cold and furious. As we walked up the porch steps, she blocked the door. Her eyes narrowed. Before we go inside, I want to know where the demolition permit is. I called the city office today, Amy. They have no record of a permit for this address. You lied. My heart hammered, but I kept my face blank. She was good. She had done her homework. The permit is in the application phase, Barbara. It's a complex process for a property of this size, I countered smoothly. The demolition threat was simply to ensure you took the contractual deadline seriously. I apologize for the necessary deception. You apologize, she spat. You ruined my life. I paid you several $1,000,000 for a house you said was a burden. I think I merely facilitated the end of one chapter for you to begin a new one, I corrected her. I pulled out my keys now. The feeling of unlocking her front door with my own key was incredibly potent. The house was empty, eerily so. The movers had been efficient and thorough. The only things left were dust bunnies, the faint scent of old lavender, and the indelible shape of where her monstrous leather sofa used to sit. Barbara walked through the empty rooms like a ghost, touching the bare walls, whispering to the air. It was pathetic, but I felt no pity. She had spent the entire time trying to destroy my new life. Now she was mourning the loss of her old one, a loss entirely of her own making. Then she stopped in the middle of the large, empty living room, the space where she always held her extravagant Christmas parties. She turned to us, her eyes blazing with a newfound, terrifying clarity. I know what you've done, Amy. You think you've won. You think you've taken my house, my control, my son, she said, her voice shaking but firm. But there's one thing you haven't taken. She pulled a small silver key on a tarnished chain from around her neck. This is the key to the attic. There are things up there. Things Mark's father hid. Things that you won't like. Things that will tell Mark exactly who he married. Mark frowned. What are you talking about, Mom? Dad didn't hide anything. Oh, he did, darling. Your father was a sentimental man. He kept secrets, and he told me, only me, that if I ever needed a way to protect you from someone who didn't deserve you, I should use the attic. She smiled, a truly unsettling, triumphant grin. And I think this is that moment. She walked over to the old fireplace, reached into a decorative brass vase, and pulled out a small, rolled-up piece of parchment. An old will. You bought the house, Amy, but the contract said nothing about the contents of the attic. And since you've been so focused on getting me out, you didn't think to change the locks immediately, did you? She laughed, a chilling, triumphant sound that echoed in the empty house. The key is in the attic door. Go on, Amy. Go see what your dear husband's father kept hidden. Go see why your inheritance might not be quite as secure as you think. Because I'm not the only one who can play the legal game, dear. Mark looked terrified. Barbara's face held a combination of malice and victory that was deeply disturbing. She truly believed she had found the ultimate checkmate. I could see the wheels turning in Mark's mind. His father, who he idolized, hiding secrets? Secrets that could ruin his marriage? Mom, what is this nonsense? Give me that paper, Mark demanded. Trying to snatch the rolled-up parchment, Barbara stepped back, clutching it tightly. No, darling, this is Amy's problem now. She wanted the house. She gets the consequences. Go on, Amy, upstairs. The attic hatch is in the master bedroom closet. The key is in the lock. Mark turned to me, his eyes pleading. Amy, don't. Let's just call Mr. Harrison. We'll get a restraining order. This is just a pathetic final attempt to scare us. But I couldn't back down. Not now. If I showed fear, Barbara would use it forever. And more importantly, the mention of Mark's father's secrets was a hook I couldn't ignore. My life was finally perfect. A loving husband, financial freedom, a beautiful new property. I needed to know if this was a legitimate threat or just an elaborate lie. We're going up, I said, my voice firm. "Mark, you stay here. I'm going alone. If this is a trap, I don't want you involved." "Like hell I'm staying here," he muttered, following me up the stairs. The master bedroom was as empty and echoing as the living room. The large walk-in closet smelled faintly of Barbara's expensive perfume. High on the ceiling, obscured by the shadows, was the familiar pull-down attic hatch. Sure enough, a small silver key was dangling from the lock mechanism. I reached up, twisted the key, and pulled the cord. The ladder creaked down, releasing a cloud of 30 years of dust. The air that wafted down was stale and musty. Mark reached the top first, shining his phone flashlight around. The attic was exactly what you'd expect. A low, dark space crammed with forgotten relics of Mark's childhood. Old school projects, dusty toys, Christmas decorations, and trunks covered in white sheeting. "See? Nothing but junk," Mark sighed, relieved. But Barbara's confidence had been unnerving. I ignored the boxes and walked toward the center beam, shining my own light slowly across the floorboards. Then I saw it. Tucked beneath an old army blanket, there was a small, well-crafted wooden chest. It wasn't dusty. Someone had been up here recently. Barbara. I knelt down and pulled the chest free. It wasn't locked. I lifted the lid. Inside, there were two main items. The first was a series of dated financial ledgers, bound in leather. The second was a thick brown envelope sealed with red wax. I ignored the ledgers for a moment and focused on the envelope. Mark's name was written on the front in his father's bold, distinctive handwriting. To be opened by Mark. Only if he needs to protect himself from financial ruin or an untrustworthy person. My hands were shaking again. Mark reached for it, but I pulled it away slightly. "Wait, let's see what else is here." I flipped through the top ledger. It wasn't a family budget. It was an extremely detailed record of deposits and payments, specifically referencing dates and large sums of money transferred to an offshore account. The dates spanned a 10-year period, ending shortly before Mark's father's sudden death. "What is all this, Amy?" Mark whispered, his voice hoarse. "Dad wasn't a criminal. He was a CPA." "He was a CPA, which means he was good with numbers, Mark," I said, pointing to a column labeled Client X, retention fee. "This looks like a money laundering scheme." Mark looked horrified. His perfect father, his moral compass, involved in something illegal? Just then, we heard Barbara's voice from below, sounding triumphant. "Did you find it, children? Have you found your little treasure?" I quickly pulled out the brown envelope. "We'll deal with this later," I whispered to Mark, tucking the ledgers back in the chest. "This is the real threat." I carefully broke the brittle red wax seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper, an official notarized document. It was not a will. It was a deed of trust. Dated 5 years prior, the document established a trust in Mark's name. The trust's sole asset? The house itself. The deed stipulated that upon the death of Mark's father, the property would transfer directly into the trust for Mark, bypassing the marital estate, essentially protecting it from a potential second marriage or from Barbara's squandering. But here was the kicker. A final clause, typed but initialed and notarized, stated that if Mark was ever deemed incapacitated or unduly influenced by a spouse, Barbara, as the executor, had the right to dissolve the trust and transfer the house to herself, provided she compensated Mark the current market value, which she had conveniently just done. I stared at the paper, Then at the empty house below, Barbara hadn't tried to steal the house with her outrageously high counteroffer. She had just forced me to pay her for the house, fulfilling the clause in the deed of trust. She wasn't just leveraging the house, she was executing her late husband's secret legal strategy. But that wasn't the worst part. The final line of the deed gave Mark's father the power to name a contingent beneficiary outside of the family. Should the house be sold or transferred, the contingent beneficiary was listed. It wasn't a family member, it was the Amy Barnes Foundation, non-existent. I frowned, confused. Why would he name a non-existent foundation with my name? Mark, reading over my shoulder, breathed a shaky gasp. Amy, what did Dad know? Why would he name something with your name? We've only been married 7 years. Then I looked at the date on the trust. 5 years prior, Mark and I had been married for 2 years at that point. I looked back at the financial ledgers. I needed context. I quickly opened the chest again and pulled out the ledgers, flipping to the section marked Client X. The handwriting was clear, and there, right next to a large transfer date, was a single handwritten note. Final payment for relocation and new identity. Keep Amy safe. I dropped the ledger. The paper fluttered open, revealing the payment description. Pimped J.A. Bogart. J.A. Bogart, Jessica Ann Bogart. The name of the voice artist I planned to use for my videos. My mind raced. This wasn't about money laundering. This was about my past. Mark's father hadn't been laundering money. He had been protecting someone, possibly me, using his illegal contacts and accounting skills. Before I met Mark, I had lived a completely different life under a different name, Jessica Ann Bogart, before I had to abruptly leave everything and start over due to a violent, high-stakes family drama involving an abusive ex-fiancé and a large inheritance. I hadn't changed my name legally, but I had used the name Amy for 7 years to avoid detection. I had buried that identity deep. Only 3 people knew my real name, and all of them were supposed to be dead. I looked at the ledger, then at the deed, then at Mark. Mark's father didn't just know about the secret money and the secret trust. He knew my deepest, most terrifying secret. He didn't protect the house from me. He set up a trust to give me the house if I was ever exposed, and he left a paper trail that linked my current identity, Amy Barnes, to my former protected identity, Jessica Ann Bogart. Barbara's final trick hadn't been to get the money, it was to lead me to this attic and to the truth that could shatter my entire life. The air in the attic suddenly felt thin and suffocating. Mark was staring at the ledger, his face pale, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The reference to J.A. Bogart had gone straight over his head. He had no idea that was the name I was running from. But the financial records, the coded payments, and the secret deed were enough to shatter his world. "What is this, Amy? What is going on?" Mark demanded, his voice thick with confusion and a hint of betrayal. My dad. Why would he do this? Was he in some kind of trouble? "Mark, we need to get out of here," I said, snatching the papers, stuffing them into the chest and pulling the ladder up. The fewer eyes that saw this, the better. We stumbled downstairs. Barbara was standing exactly where we had left her, holding the rolled-up parchment with the triumphant smile still plastered on her face. "Did you enjoy the discovery, dear?" she asked, her voice mocking. "Found a few little secrets your husband's late father left for you? He was a meticulous man. Rest his soul. He wanted his son protected." I walked straight up to her, not letting my eyes leave hers. Mark stayed slightly behind me, still reeling. You didn't know, did you, Barbara? I said, my voice dangerously soft. You thought this deed of trust was your protection. You thought your husband set it up so you could steal the house back if Mark married someone he didn't approve of. Her triumphant smile faltered slightly. He set it up so that I could protect Mark from gold diggers like you. That house was supposed to be Mark's legacy, not your demolition project. And he set it up so that the house, upon your transfer, would immediately pass into a trust named after my past identity, the Amy Barnes Foundation, I stated, watching the blood drain from her face. You triggered a contingency, Barbara. You didn't just execute the trust, you executed his final wish. She looked utterly confused, staring at the parchment. A foundation? What foundation? Arthur checked this. It was supposed to be a legal loophole to give me the house back. It was a legal trap, I clarified, taking the parchment from her slack hand. It wasn't just about protecting Mark from me. It was about protecting me from you. Your husband wasn't protecting Mark's legacy. He was protecting my life and his son's marriage. I looked at Mark, pulling him closer. Mark, your father was not protecting you from me. He was protecting me from my past. The Client X ledgers? They weren't about money laundering. Your father, the CPA, used his shady contacts to help me disappear 7 years ago after my life was threatened by a very powerful, very dangerous man. He helped me create the identity Amy Barnes and relocate here. He set up this trust so that if my cover was ever blown by someone greedy like you, Barbara, I would have a fully paid asset to disappear with again. I paused, letting the weight of the confession settle. Mark looked from me to the attic hatch, then back to the crumpled parchment. My dad knew? He whispered, his eyes wide with shock. He knew your real name? He knew you were running? Yes, Mark, he knew everything. He was a silent guardian. He never told you because he knew you couldn't keep a secret from your mother. He set up this trust to ensure that even if you didn't know the truth, I could still walk away safely, funded by the house you just sold me. Barbara's jaw was hanging open. She had aimed a rifle at me and instead had shot herself in the foot, exposing her husband's secret double life as a protective agent and validating the wife she hated. "Lies! You're lying, Arthur!" she cried, turning to her cousin. Arthur finally found his voice, shaking his head slightly. "The language is ambiguous, Barbara. A trust is a trust. If the contingent beneficiary is named, even if it's a non-existent entity, the legal intent is clear. Amy is correct. You were a facilitator, not a beneficiary." I looked at Barbara delivering the final crushing blow. "And guess what, Barbara? You know that massive lottery win you tried to steal? Your son's father was the reason I was here to buy the ticket. He was the reason I was safe enough to play. Your greed brought me here, and your husband's protective love just ensured that I keep every penny." She staggered back against the empty wall, a monument to her own self-inflicted defeat. Her face was contorted, a mixture of rage, realization, and utter despair. She had lost the house. She had confirmed I was a better secret keeper than her, and she had discovered her late husband's true loyalty lay with protecting his son's new life, not her financial demands. "I hate you, Amy Barnes," she hissed, the words raw and venomous. "It's Barnes Bogart now, Barbara, and I wouldn't have it any other way," I replied, finally smiling a real, cold smile. "Now I suggest you take your millions and enjoy that Florida condo, because if you set foot on this property again, I will not only file a restraining order, but I will expose your late husband's full financial activities to the IRS and ensure that you, Arthur, and every last penny you have left ends up under intense scrutiny." It was a blatant bluff about exposing his activities, but the fear in her eyes was real. She knew that any scrutiny of a late husband's finances, even the legitimate parts, could destroy her. She didn't say another word. She grabbed Arthur's arm and stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind her. The sound echoed in the empty space, signaling the end of her reign. Mark and I stood in the quiet darkness of the empty house. "Amy," he said, his voice quiet and shaky, "you have a lot of explaining to do." "I know, Mark," I said, walking over to him and taking his hand, "and I promise I will tell you everything. But first, let's get out of this house. We have millions, a clean slate, and a life to build. Your dad gave us both a second chance. Now it's time to take it." Mark and I left Barbara's house that night with the exhaustion of survivors who just walked away from a wreck. When we got into the car, Mark was silent, the combined shock of betrayal and discovery keeping him numb. "Mark, listen," I said, starting the engine. "I know this is a lot. A secret from your father, a secret from me, the reality that your mother is a genuine monster. But I promise you, I will tell you everything from the very beginning." He agreed. That night, back in our small old apartment, Mark sat on the couch while I recounted the entire story of my life 7 years ago. The name I used then, Jessica Ann Bogart, the dangerous fiancée who threatened my life, and how I fled. I explained how his father, the CPA, had turned into a relocation specialist, using his illicit financial network to secure my new identity and protect me. Mark listened silently. His idealized father was revealed to be a clandestine protector and a master of financial subterfuge. "So," Mark finally said, his voice hollow, "we've been married for 7 years, and my dad knew more about you than I did." "Your father was protecting you, Mark," I answered, "protecting you from your mother, from her need for control, and from my dangerous past. He knew the less he told you, the safer I would be. And the trap he set with the house was a test of our marriage." Mark finally smiled, a real smile this time. "I'm gonna miss him. I wish I hadn't signed that post-nuptial agreement just to appease my mother. My dad's complex legacy of honesty was the only thing he really left me." "But you did sign it, Mark," I said, taking his hand. "And that freed you from your mother. That post-nup protected my millions, and your father's mechanism ensured you didn't lose his legacy. We are both safe." From that moment, Mark changed. His father's secrets and his mother's despicable actions completely lifted Barbara's shadow from him. He no longer felt guilt toward his mother, only cold disgust. The next day, I called Mr. Harrison. I told him about the attic discoveries and Barbara's intended gambit. "Amy, this is incredible. Barbara used her husband's protective plan against you," Mr. Harrison said with admiration. "However, the title is officially yours. The only condition for the trust's transfer was that Barbara compensate Mark the market value for the house. You fulfilled that payment. Legally, everything is clean." "What about the Amy Barnes Foundation?" I asked. That was the late gentleman's stroke of genius. If a charitable foundation is not officially established, the funds typically revert to the property of the founder or their original intent. In this case, the house is yours. You can establish your own foundation, transfer the money, or simply leave it as a memory. Barbara's hands are tied. And so, Barbara's greed turned her elaborate revenge into her own ruin. In trying to steal the house from us, she perfectly financed my secure, new life. Barbara flew to Florida a week later. On Mark's birthday, she sent a brief, cold text. "I hope Amy is making you happy. Remember, I am always your mother." Mark read the message and deleted it. We left our old apartment and moved into Mark's childhood home. From the outside, it looked the same, but everything inside was different. We didn't tear it down. We gutted and redesigned the interior. We stripped out Barbara's dazzling Italian ceramics. We shipped off her oversized furniture. That house is ours now, a fortress protecting the memory of Mark's father and the reality of my new life. Now, I'm telling this story. It's not just a story about winning the lottery. It's a story about a woman's emancipation from both her mother-in-law's greed and her own dark past. This is a story about how far you'll go to protect the people you love. Barbara tried to steal my house, but what she didn't know is that I stole so much more from her: her control, her son's respect, and her peace of mind. She has millions in her pocket, but she owes her biggest defeat to my small, determined revenge plot. And I, Amy Barnes, aka Jessica Ann Bogart, won everything. Thank you for listening to this difficult confession. We are so grateful to share these stories with you. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments section below.